Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about some free, simple, easy ways to support your hormonal health. So health doesn't need to be complex. We're taught these days that we need to spend all of this money, do all of these fancy things and tests and supplements in order to be hormonally healthy, but that's not the case at all. And I can see by looking on social media and online how health can seem very hard to achieve, and the whole term like wellness is very unachievable to a lot of demographics. So I can see how they kind of get angry or frustrated or just don't think that they're worth being hormonally healthy because they can't afford some of these things, or they just seem so foreign to them. So I want to kind of break down that myth and really get back to basics on this episode. And if you search something like nutrition on Instagram, we see a lot of green smoothie bowls and superfood powders, morning elixirs with all of these expensive products, people going to spas and getting massages. I really try and not promote that because it's not realistic for a lot of people in the world. So if I was to post my meals, they would look absolutely terrible. It would just be basic food. Me going on a nature walk every day is just as good for my health as going to a fancy spa to get a massage, basically. So we've survived as women since the beginning of time with all of these things, and there have been times where we've thrived and we wouldn't have evolved where we are now if that wasn't the case. So it's not a deficiency of all of these things that have causing us to be sick, probably a lack of the basic and the foundational things, of which I'm going to be talking about today. They don't seem very sexy or cool compared to some of the other things that are discussed these days. So maybe that's why they're not being spoken about, but people get very carried away in thinking that there's something missing, like this new product, this new superfood is going to be the cure-all or the magic diet that's fixing all of these problems, when if you've worked with people like I do, it usually comes back to these basic things, which is a little bit weird because I'm really repeating myself multiple times, but people really do need to hear it. But that said, if you follow these steps, you're probably going to get 80-90% there to hormonal health, but there is that 10-20% where you might need additional supplements because unfortunately environmental toxins and pollutants and stress and soil depletion really burns through our minerals, and we require a lot more support these days. So that's a factor that has changed, and we're now working long hours. We're trying to raise families, women, and be a full-time kind of either boss or employee. And back in the day we used to just have one role, just being at home for the most part. So our bodies do require a little bit more support, but you can't go for some of those things until you've really address the foundations. So today's episode is going to be 3 foundational and fundamental steps to achieve hormonal harmony. And you've probably heard me talk about these things a million times before, but it's for a reason. It's because these things absolutely work. I promise you, with all of the clients that I see, this is the stuff that gets the biggest change. It's sometimes the hardest because it's easy in comparison to pop a supplement every day or take something out of your diet, but I'm going to keep reminding you of them because I really want to emphasize how fundamental they are. So starting off with step 1, it's getting more sunlight and nature. So I've had episodes in the past just on this. So there was one, episode number 53, with Andy Mant of BluBlox. He specializes in circadian rhythm. And because he noticed such a big difference, and it was a game changer for his health when he started to optimize his circadian rhythm, which is kind of his internal body clock, he decided to create a company which offered blue light blocking glasses. One of my favorite products, health products there are. So if you are going to invest in something, it would be something like a pair of blue light blocking glasses. Once you've got them forever, but they've made a huge difference to my health. So not necessarily free, but let's start with the free things that we can do, but there are some additional hacks and things I'm going to talk about if you have to spend a little bit of money. Definitely not super expensive, but really, really supportive addition. So with circadian rhythm, the reason this is important for our hormones overall is because as humans, we should be very in sync with the sun and the moon. But as women in particular, this is really important we're very cyclical beings. And as women, our menstrual cycle is highly influenced by the light and the dark cycles, the lunar, the moon cycles. And you might have noticed, if you've lived in a group of women before, or you've had sisters, or been with your mum, you tend to start to regulate your menstrual cycle around the same time. Not if you're on birth control, obviously, but if you're not on any hormones and you're living together, maybe at college or university, you were living in a group of women, you all tended to be on your period at the same time. That's the superpower of women. We kind of connect to each other energetically, but it's also highly influenced by the moon cycles. So most women ovulate on the full moon and have their period around the new moon. There are a group of women, I'm kind of in the opposite camp, and we do the opposite. So we ovulate on the new moon, have a period with the full moon. And I have swapped back and forth, but from what I've read, the type of pattern that I have, we tend to be like the healers of the community. So back in the day when everyone would have been on their period in the red tent, we would have been the ones caring for them, and then vice versa other times of the month. So really interesting stuff. And circadian rhythms, great for every single system of the body overall. It influences our appetite and our energy, our adrenals, the signals that come from our brain, the neurotransmitters, the time of day that they're released, particularly morning sunlight. So if you can, first thing in the morning, as soon as you get up, open up your curtains really wide. Even better if you can get outside, even if it's just standing in the garden or at the back door for 2 minutes, without any glasses, any sunglasses on, without even any contact lenses, because some of them have UV filters, that actually prevents that light spectrum from getting into the eyes and signaling to the pineal gland to produce kind of certain hormones and suppress your melatonin. And the more sunlight you get through the day, the better your sleep is going to be at night. So sleep and rest is number 2 on the list. But we want to mimic the natural sun rhythms and the light rhythms inside as well. So even if you go outside and it's probably darker, especially in the UK winters, it's probably darker outside than it is in the inside in the morning. But I promise that the light spectrum is still going to be there. So even when it's grey and raining and dreary, the light is still going to be coming through the clouds and still giving you those same benefits. Whereas other parts of the country, like Australia now, it's coming to their summer, they can really see the blue skies and the sun, so it's much more obvious to them, but you're still going to be getting a benefit. And you really need to prioritize this if you're also someone who struggles with seasonal depression, or the sun and the winter kind of seasons really affect your mood. I'm one of them. Since these past couple of weeks in the UK, the sun is setting much earlier. It's a lot darker, and I can just feel myself not being as productive, which is fine. The seasons in life, the seasons obviously in nature, so we have to be respectful of them and not trying to keep pushing through, and just honor that maybe I just need to start work a little bit earlier and be working smarter, not harder with my job. But that's a whole nother tangent. But in the evening, once the sun goes down, you also want to do the opposite. So mimicking what's happening in nature inside your home. So when the sun is setting, obviously in winter it's going to be a little bit earlier, and in summer it's maybe 8, 9 o'clock. Once the sun goes down, you want to mimic that inside as well. So turning down your room lighting, maybe just using candles or lamps instead. Maybe filtering your screens. So if you have an iPhone, there's a simple hack that you can do that turns your screen red. BluBlox do have a blog post on that on their website as well. So just type in red screen, smartphone, and with 3 clicks of your home button, your screen will turn bright red. That blocks blue light from getting into your eyes when you're on your phone at night. Ideally, you should be shutting those things down as early as possible, just so your brain's not kind of overactive during that time. That's another aspect. But if you're on your laptop, you can download something called Flux, f.lux. That helps to filter it as well. I just have mine on all day long because I'm still getting bombarded by room lighting and everything, so I might as well reduce one exposure that I can, and it's not going to cause any problems. It's actually going to do more benefit. Super easy, free little hack that you can do if you're having to use your phone for some emails and doing some work, to understand that that is necessary for some people. So that's really going to influence our or menstrual cycle. There's people who have very lengthy periods or have amenorrhea, and maybe they go camping one weekend, and when you're camping you can't really be exposed to sunlight when the sun goes down, and it's very hard to do, and that's why people have like the best sleep of their life. The energy is so much better. They're going to bed a couple of hours after sunset, whereas when we're in our regular homes we're watching Netflix until 11 p.m. with the blue light glaring in our eyes. So kind of mimicking that, you don't need to go to the extremes of camping. I'm not a camping type of gal, so I just mimic those things inside. And I've recently, I packed it away for a while since I moved, but I was again struggling with waking up in the morning because my new bedroom is like really dark in the morning. So I got my Lumi lamp. It's called a Lumi body clock. I got that out of my storage and put that up, and it's been a game changer. So that is a natural light that wakes you up slowly in the morning. I still set an alarm clock just because I don't want to oversleep, but that's really helping me to get out of bed first thing in the morning. And just looking at that, not directly, obviously, you don't want to stare at the sun either because you're going to damage your eyes, but that really tells the brain, okay, it's morning, let's produce the highest amount of cortisol throughout the day. That's what gets you out of bed, that's what gets you motivated and ready to go. Cortisol gets a bad rap, but it should be high in the morning, not that high that you have anxiety and you dread your work day, you have palpitations. That's like an extreme, but it should be high enough. And that spike is known as the cortisol awakening response. There's actually a test, the Dutch test, which is the Dutch Plus, that measures that. So if you're really wanting to know what your cortisol awakening response is, there is a lab test for that, but why not just get started with some basic things to optimize it anyway? That's my thinking. But the cortisol awakening response, so that shoots up of cortisol first thing in the morning, as soon as your eyes open, that's very supportive and beneficial for the immune system. So it actually primes the immune system and it keeps any rogue or faulty immune cells at bay. So if you're someone struggling with autoimmunity, or you have a family history of autoimmune conditions like psoriasis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, celiac, type 1 diabetes, etc., you should really be even more cautious of this. So I've got autoimmunity on both sides of my family. So my cortisol awakening response is a top priority, just in one of the things that helps keep my immune system nice and strong. And also in my sunlight and nature step, there's so many other benefits with putting your feet on the earth. So getting the negative ions in the air that you breathe, the forest bathing that you do, which has been scientifically shown to reduce cortisol levels. There's a huge connection with stress and cortisol and your hormones. So that's step 3 that we're going to come on to. But forest bathing is simply just walking in a forest or a woods or nature, whatever you've got access to. Even if you're in the middle of New York City, you've got Central Park and some of the other parks available. So in cities, there are little parks available that you can just pretend that you're in the middle of nowhere, and you're still going to get tons of benefits there. If you're lucky enough to live near the ocean, going out for an ocean swim, getting some natural magnesium, Epsom salts from the ocean water. And we're so disconnected these days from the outdoor world. No wonder why chronic disease is on the rise. That's like one of many factors. Obviously, diet and food quality has completely changed, but I really think it's partly due to our disconnect with nature. Back in the day, we used to be outdoors maybe 90% of the time, and now it's completely flipped. And actually, indoor air is more polluted than outdoor air. So I know that car fumes and factories and all of that is really bad these days, especially if you're living in the city, but actually indoor air is a lot worse in many places. So just another way you could just open your windows if the weather is nice and that permits, obviously. Just trying to bring some nature into your home. Maybe that's using plants. All pretty low cost, free things that you can do. Getting vitamin D throughout the year naturally from the sun, so not relying on supplements when you have a free resource for vitamin D. I know that if you have skin cancer risk and all of that, then you obviously need to be careful, but most people should be able to build tolerance to the sun throughout the year, so that in the summer they can get healthy amounts of sun exposure, build up their vitamin D stores, so that at this time of year, so September, October time, heading into winter, they don't completely tank in vitamin D throughout the winter months. and end up depressed, joint pains, all of that. Vitamin D is actually more of a hormone than a vitamin. So this is because it affects every single cell of the body. It helps with immune modulation. So again, if you're someone with hyperactive immunity, allergies, autoimmune, it helps to calm that down. Whereas if you're someone with immune suppression, you're sick all the time, it will help to build you up. So it balances that seesaw. It helps with bone health. So if you're someone with amenorrhea, missing periods, you've been on the birth control pill with synthetic hormones for a number of years, then vitamin D should help you to improve your bone health, because some of those other things, not having a period, having synthetic estrogen in the body, can really affect your bone health, not now, but maybe 20, 30 years time. And that's unless you do something about it. So getting sun exposure, getting outside for a walk, combining that physical activity is amazing for bone health. And the vitamin D from the sun is, well, sun exposure is so much better than a vitamin D supplement. So people think, oh, why can't I just take a vitamin D supplement? I don't really enjoy being in the sun. I'm working all day. But you still need to prioritize it, because you're getting so much more than just vitamin D when you get natural sun exposure. You're getting nitric oxide production in the skin, which helps with vessel dilation, cardiovascular health. You're getting the UV rays, you're getting that light spectrum in the eyes to signal the melatonin production at night, the circadian rhythm balance. So you can't just rely on supplements. Same with food. Yes, supplements may be necessary, things like magnesium for everyone, but the foundation of our nutrition should come from diet, ideally. So on to step 2 for hormonal health. 3 simple things to add in would be more rest and to prioritize sleep. This kind of goes into that whole body clock thing as well. So winding down in the evening, shutting off the blue light is going to help you get a better sleep. And that's where we mainly heal. So throughout the day, we're kind of in breakdown mode. The body's just got so much to do, digestion of food, kind of moving around, all of that. Your body is literally breaking down like muscle tissue and things, and glycogen stores throughout the day. So in the evening, that's where we should be resting and healing. What if you're eating too late before bed, or you're not eating 4 hours before you go to bed, so your blood sugar's all over the place? Maybe you're really stressed, maybe you're watching TV, scary Netflix film right before bedtime. You may be in bed for 8 hours, but are you actually getting the deep restorative healing sleep that you need? Probably not. A lot of people spend a lot of time in the light stages of sleep. So they're tossing and turning, maybe they're waking up to pee every couple of hours. That's not great. And if you're waking up unrefreshed, you're not getting good quality sleep, even if you're in bed potentially for 8 or 9 hours. So the sleep hormone melatonin is not just a sleep hormone, it's also a key antioxidant. So it helps with reducing inflammation, helping protect us from any cancerous cells in the body. So that's why people who work night shifts or have chronic insomnia, they have high levels of things like breast cancer and Alzheimer's, because they're not getting that antioxidant effect from melatonin. And our body goes through different stages at night. So it's believed that the hours between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. are for physical healing, whereas the hours from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. are more psychological. So that's where we tend to dream, that's where we tend to consolidate memories, process emotions. So ideally, the optimal sleep time for most people is between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Obviously, that can vary a little bit. So I try to be asleep by 10 p.m. just to give my body the best support I can. And I do tend to be more of an early bird, so I'm more productive in the day. There are a subset of the population who are night owls, so they can't really get to sleep, whether that is just from bad body clock and circadian rhythm training throughout their life, that's hard to say. But in the Chinese medicine TCM world, the body clock is really used. So there's certain hours of the day and the night where certain organs are more active, and you should be supporting them at that time. So I'll give some examples here with the nighttime ones. So in terms of Chinese medicine, the hours of 9 p.m. till 11 p.m, this is the triple burner time. So this is when our metabolic and our endocrine health is the priority. And this regulates things like blood sugar and hormonal health. So if you're struggling with any of those things, so particularly PCOS, which is kind of my area, I like to specialize in, then going to bed around that time as earlier as possible is best. It's going to be really supportive. And then the hours between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. is the gallbladder time. So if you're not asleep by that time, or if you're waking up at maybe like 12:30 a.m. every day and you don't know why, or it takes you a long time to get to sleep, maybe you're only going to bed at 1:30, you're only falling asleep at that time, this can indicate some gallbladder issues. So there are some other signs that this may be a problem as well. So an intolerance to fatty foods, maybe you're burping or you get some digestive pain, usually on the right, under the right rib. Maybe you have some burping, some reflux, loose stools, could be floating or oily stools, excessive wiping after going to the bathroom. They tend to be signs of poor gallbladder health. Also, there's a big connection with estrogen dominance. So it's a double whammy, because having estrogen dominance can make the gallbladder more dysfunctional. It can thicken the bile, and the gallbladder is kind of what squirts the bile out. But also, if you have gallbladder issues and poor bile flow, that's going to make you more estrogen dominant, because you can't actually detox the used or excess hormones correctly with that. And the time between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. is the liver time. This is an extremely common time for people to have sleep issues. There's people who literally wake up at 1:30 a.m. every single morning and find it hard to get to sleep. So if that's you, this really indicates some sort of liver issue. I'm not talking about like disease in the organs here, by the way, just some imbalances, something to focus on. And this could be blood sugar related as well. The liver is really involved in blood sugar regulation. So it could be that you need to stop eating so close to bedtime, or you need to start having a bedtime snack. It's all about playing around, because everyone's very different, seeing what works best for you. And this is where the liver detoxifies. So again, throughout the day it is doing things, but this is the main time between 1 and 3 a.m. in terms of Chinese medicine, when things really happen. So our body filters hormones or activates hormones. It gets rid of any accumulations throughout the day with just daily waste products from digestion, heavy metals that we breathed in, pollutants that we've been exposed to. It needs to get all of those out. So you can imagine if you're not going to bed until the early hours, you then need to fall into a deep sleep, and then maybe you've missed this whole entire time. So a one-off, it's not going to be too much of a problem, but if this is happening chronically, then you can see where issues start to happen. And some other signs that your liver might be a little bit dysfunctional could be bloating, so think any digestive symptom, reflux, bad breath, skin issues, having a yellow tinge to the skin, or just rashes, sensitivities to foods or chemicals, lots of things. I think the liver does like 500 things. So if that's not happening well, you can see how that can affect every single body system in some way. And that is the time where these organs are most active or regenerating. And yeah, if you're symptomatic or wake up during that time, then it may be something to focus on. So the other part of this point was more rest. So I've lumped them in together because they're kind of the same thing. But when we sleep, we're obviously resting, but I want you to rest more during the day as well. Especially as women, as I said at the start, we live in such a fast-paced and different lifestyle to what our genetics expect in such a short amount of time. Even in the past 50 years, the expectations of females has completely shifted to what it used to be. And we're living in a very masculine energy now, which is fine for some people or for certain durations of life. We have to hit the word, but hustle and get things done. But there is a way around it. We can learn to work smarter, not harder. We can learn to respect things like the menstrual cycle, which I do want to touch on as well, where we're at in our cycle, honor the times that we have the most and the least energy. So don't just reach for a cup of coffee and adaptogen when you're tired. You need to honor your symptoms and not just push through. Listen to your body while it's giving you these messages before it starts screaming at you. Because some people literally wake up one day and their body's so exhausted because they've either ignored or not paid attention to the symptoms for that long that they have chronic fatigue syndrome and can't get out of bed. And some people think that that just randomly happens and they didn't get any feedback from the body, but I can guarantee there was some messages there that weren't honoured. So step number 3 is stress management and or a self-care practice. So this is different for everyone. if I was to tell one client to do an hour of meditation in the morning, if they've got 3 kids, they're at work at 9 a.m. all day and they're stressed out of their mind, that's not going to work. That's actually going to become more of a stress to them. So it needs to be something that you enjoy, something that you will be consistent with as well. So I'd rather you do 5 minutes every, like 3 times a day than 1 hour, but then you're stressed and running around like a headless chicken for the rest of the day. I know the consistency one is going to work so much better. And it's important to be proactive and not reactive when it comes to stress. So even if your life isn't really stressful at the moment, things are going well, I don't need to just wait until something happens before you start to implement this. We need to be proactive and start to do things now. So it's like training. You wouldn't just wake up and go and run a marathon one day. You need to train. So like you go to the gym to build your muscle, we need to build the brain muscle as well, so that when things do happen, which they will, they don't completely wipe us out and knock our health out of whack. We need to strengthen our vitality, strengthen our body, so that when stresses, the inevitable stress does come, we can respond and react in a much better way. So the way that stress impacts hormones is a little bit misunderstood. There's a whole thing that was big for a while, like the pregnenolone steal, like don't get stressed, otherwise it's going to steal your cortisol to make progesterone. That is kind of in a roundabout way accurate, but it's not a steal that happens. So your body doesn't take hormones from one place to another. Basically what happens is the female brain is very sensitive to signals of stress and danger and unsafety. So when anything like real perceived physical stress, chemical stress happens, your fertility sensors of the brain are turned down. So it's your brain that's doing this, not the stealing happening elsewhere in the body or the ovaries or anywhere. So your brain will sense stress, again, real or perceived. You could be sat on the couch worrying about something and this same thing is still happening. So that's the power of the mind. But the brain will think, no, it's potentially not a good time to have a baby this month. Let's delay ovulation. Let's stop ovulation altogether. And that could result in an extended period, a completely missing period, an ovulatory period. So no ovulation happened that month. So obviously you wouldn't be able to fall pregnant. They're the types of things that I'm talking about because of stress. And typical stress management techniques we hear about can be good. So things like Epsom salt baths. This is because magnesium sulfate that's in the salts helps with calming the nervous system. Stress depletes magnesium, helps with muscle relaxation. That's great. So maybe a few Epsom salt baths every week. You can do meditation with or without guidance. So there's lots of free apps these days, or you can just basically sit there with your eyes closed for 5 minutes, following your breath, just trying to not have a clear mind completely, but just kind of process any thoughts and just focus on the inhale and exhale, maybe saying a mantra in the head. That helps to calm down the body and the nervous system again. It gives you a moment of peace. Closing your eyes kind of deprives one of your senses, so that we're just bombarded constantly with noises and sounds and images. Or just closing your eyes just really calms the brain down a little bit. It's like closing the tabs on your internet browser. If you're like me, I've got like 300 active at once. You can do breathing exercises. This signals safety to the body, because if our life was really in danger, we wouldn't be able to breathe long, slow, deep breaths. And there's all different ones, like the box breathing. So inhale for 5, hold for 5, out for 5. There's apps that you can get that help you and guide you along that. There's Wim Hof breathing, there's alternate nostril breathing, a ton of different ones. So again, find what works for you with that. And things like yoga, which is some sort of like a meditative exercise, so you get like a 2-in-1 benefit there. Works on the chakra system, it's low impact. So most people are aware of those things, but there are some other forms of stress management and self-care that can be just as useful, that are usually not discussed. And I try to remind my clients of these things because they're so important. So maybe it's delegating more at work or at home, getting your kids to do more chores, maybe hiring someone to clean the house once a week, even though it is an extra financial cost. Is that worth you just having a moment to sit down and relax? Maybe call a friend instead. We have to weigh up the pros and the cons here. It could be turning off social media after your dinner time and blocking people who make you feel bad about yourself, or you come off social media feeling guilty or left behind in the world. Maybe you feel like you're comparing yourself to them. Social media is great in many ways, like it helps me to connect to you guys and share and educate, but there is a huge like negative downside to it, the fact that everyone's just sharing the highlight reels. It could be going to therapy, and there's different types of therapy as well. There's like energetic body type therapies, and also like the regular talk therapy that most people are aware of. Different things work for different people. It could be working on past traumas that you've been through. Could even be like prepping healthy lunches on a Sunday afternoon for the week. This is all type of self-care and stress management. Got those two mixed up. So I'm not just talking about the spas and the massages and getting your nails done. It's just supporting your body, being a little bit more organized, and this will allow you not to skip the meal or reach for just convenience food that's maybe not as beneficial for your body. And as I said, we can't avoid stress, but we can learn how to interpret differently and how we react to it. So there's a few books that I really like. I'll link to these in the show notes as well, but there's one called the 5-second rule, which is basically saying how the feelings of stress and anxiety are the same as excitement. So that knot in the stomach, the sweaty palms, the anxiety, the heart racing, that can be interpreted as excitement. So using that as like a little trick to your brain really does help. There's another one called the chimp paradox, which is all about the monkey mind and how to quiet that down, usually with kind of fighting back those negative thoughts with something factual, and kind of giving your body evidence that the opposite is true. And another favorite is called the upside of stress, because I think now people are getting stressed about being stressed. And if you're learning about your hormones and everything all the time, and you hear cortisol's bad, stress is really bad, you're going to affect your fertility and your periods because of this. It starts to become a stress because you're then worried about being stressed. So that's not useful. So that book, the last one I mentioned, is a really great resource. Step 4 to improving hormonal health for free is to connect more. Not necessarily on social media, although, as I mentioned, this can be a place where it's amazing, especially like this year. We wouldn't have been able to get through it probably without phone calls to friends and Zoom and Skype meetings with our families. So it's good in some ways, but the comparison, the highlight reel, the jealousy, it's real. So meeting people when needed, and real life connection is the type that I'm talking about mainly, which again has been difficult this year. And this is partially why so many people are struggling hormonally. Like my clients, a lot of them are really struggling. Depression is on the rise, anxiety is huge, and it's going to be a big transition and learning curve to get back to some sort of normality, and who knows when that's going to be. And I'll not say the word, I don't want this to be banned or anything, because they're doing that, but social isolation is actually more detrimental to our health than things like smoking and obesity. So this is huge. Like, this is why I'm talking about this, because people are obviously more anxious and more stressed, but it's partly because of the fact that they're not seeing people. And we didn't realize how big it was. Even like the most introverted people, we didn't realize how much we do need physical interaction, social connection. Our genes literally expect it, and we didn't realize the importance of it until it's gone. So we need to get back into doing that at some point, but obviously that's out of our control at the moment. Even when we do, there's a big difference between you can still be in a big group of people but still feel lonely. So just have a think now, what relationships are you going to be going back to? Are your conversations with your friends more surface level? Is there anyone that you can really share your feelings with and ask for advice? So that is something to think about as well. And as women, again, we're coming back to women, because this is the women's health podcast on hormones. So men are a little bit different. But women, when stressed, we tend to tend and befriend. So that's our coping mechanism to stress. This is because oxytocin, the bonding, the loving hormone, reduces cortisol. And this is why caring for animals, petting a dog. I've been really debating getting a dog recently. I'm just in a very nurturing, loving mood, but I'm weighing up the pros and cons with that because I'm in an apartment. It's raining all the time recently, and yeah, I'm quite busy throughout the day. So that's my dilemma at the moment. If anyone's got any advice on having a dog in an apartment, please let me know. And being in romantic relationships as a woman also positively impacts your hormonal health. As long as it's a good relationship, obviously. If it's abusive or there's any issues there, then that's probably going to provide the opposite. But intimacy, feeling supported by a masculine energy as a woman, as a female, is one of the best things for our well-being. And there's people who get into a relationship and the cycles normalize, the chronically low estrogen regulates, they start ovulating again, whereas there's people in really bad, stressful relationships trying to conceive just because they think it's the right thing to do. They've been wanting a baby for a couple of years, but it's not a good relationship. They split up, they find someone else, and immediately they get pregnant. So there is that energetic side of things as well. And I recently spoke about that with Amy Rope on the podcast. And this is obviously with same-sex couples, there's a little bit of a difference here, but one of you is going to be more masculine in energy-wise. So that kind of is still relevant. And I'm all for equal rights with females, but we do have to honor that there are physiological differences between men and women. We have to respect that and honor that. And I know that some people are going to be offended with me thinking that we need to have men for optimal health. I'm not saying that necessarily, but you don't need to have a man to be happy and healthy, but we do have to be aware of that it could be something relevant to consider. Next is syncing with your cycle. So this also, everything's kind of connected here, what I'm saying, which is the good thing. So you don't need to follow this to a T like some people do, because it's just not realistic for a lot of people, but I like to take inspiration from it. So if you don't have a menstrual cycle currently, and you're working on getting it back, that's the right thing to do. But you can follow the moon phases. So as I said, the full moon would be ovulation to mid-cycle. So ovulation to your period, whereas the new moon would be your period time. So you can follow that. If you're on the pill, you can't really do this fully, but you can obviously take it easier when you're on your period or your withdrawal bleed. It's not a real period. And we're cyclical beings, so men are on a 24-hour cycle. Women are on a 28-day cycle on average. So this is why men can get up the same time, do the same workout, work the 9 till 5, have less energy in the day, and they can just get up, eat the same thing, do the same thing over and over and over again. Whereas women, we probably had the experience of 1 week feeling great, feeling confident, being able to kill it in a workout class, feeling energized, and then the next week we're doing the exact same things, but feel completely different and can't keep up. So that just shows how different weeks require different things from our body. And these energy shifts shouldn't be extreme. So it shouldn't be one week nearing your period, you're absolutely exhausted, you're depressed, you're crying, you don't want to see people, but there should be a little fluctuation with your mood and your energy. That's completely normal. I do have other episodes on this going more in depth, but just as an overview, we'll base this on a 28-day cycle. So the average cycle with starting at the follicular phase. Technically the period comes into this, but we'll just start this as the end of your period, and this would be representative of spring. So energy is climbing, your hormones are climbing, you're ready to take on new challenges, your brain is thinking of new ideas, you're creative during this time. People usually feel quite good in this part of it. And then we head into ovulation, which is like summer. So this is the time where our hormones are usually at the highest, testosterone, estrogen, and our body is releasing the egg. So we tend to be more charismatic, creative, energetic, sexual around this time. And then after ovulation, we head into the luteal phase. or autumn, the lead up to the period, or we can, for some people, class this as PMS week, which is common but not normal. But this is the time where hormones are kind of tapering down a little bit. We tend to be a little bit more introverted. We don't want to go out as much. We want to just lie on the couch, eat some chocolate and rest. And then menstruation tends to be like winter, so the lowest levels of hormones. Things are a little bit more cold. We should be eating more warming foods. We should take it really easy with our workouts during that time. So if you can, schedule work commitments, birthday events, interviews, workouts in accordance to your cycle, working with your hormones rather than against them. Amazing, please do that. We have unique superpowers during each phase of the cycle. And there is a really great book on this by Elisa Vitti, or Vitti. I forgot the name, I think it's called In the Flow. That's a really good one. She literally plans her life around it, I think, so we don't need to do anything like that necessarily, but you can start to track your cycle if you aren't already. So there are some devices like the DAYSY fertility monitor, natural cycles, OVUSENSE, to see exactly when you are ovulating, because for some people it's day 14, which is like textbook, whereas some days it's day 21. So the devices will usually temperature in the mouth, but the OVUSENSE is like a vaginal temp one, usually better for fertility and when you're trying to conceive, so maybe look into the other ones otherwise. But there are some apps as well, but you can't use an app to determine ovulation without also using temperature charting, fertility awareness signs, etc. So if you're using it as contraception or to plan a pregnancy, then it's not going to be 100% accurate just using an app. But my favorite one is called My Flow, and again, that's by the same author, Elisa Vitti. And then using your period as feedback, so this comes under the cycle syncing aspect as well, or your monthly report card. So our period this month represents our health this month and 3 months prior, so the past 90 days, 100 days. And that's why 1 month you could be eating the best that you've ever done, taking your supplements, doing all the right things, but you have the worst period ever. Probably not due to what you've been doing this month. Usually, maybe it was the excessive amount of alcohol you drank 3 months ago whilst on holiday, or the huge amount of stress you went through when you lost your job during that time as well. So it's on a delay, and that's why what you do today and this month isn't maybe going to affect your period until 2 to 3 months cycles time. So keep that in mind. And for reference, a healthy period should be pretty symptom-free beforehand and during. So no PMS really, just maybe a little bit more tired, a little bit more emotional, that's completely fine. And whilst on your bleed, minimal cramps, you shouldn't need painkillers at all, but the act of expelling the uterine lining is inflammatory just in nature, so, and it's like a physical shedding, so you might feel some contractions, some mild cramps, a little bit of a dull ache, but nothing painful at all. Medium flow, bright red blood, cranberry coloured, 3 to 7 days in total on average. So that's because a lot of people don't actually know what a healthy period is, so that is just a nice overview to aim for. Step 6, so another free, simple way to improve your hormonal health is to move your body. And this does tie into number 5 as well, because I was saying about the cycle syncing and paying attention to that. So usually during the first part of the cycle, after your period, leading up to ovulation, energy is at its best. So you can maybe push it a little bit more around that time during the follicular phase, because you're naturally estrogen dominant, you're more insulin sensitive around that time, so you can better handle carbohydrates, intense workouts. Whereas in the second half of the cycle, the luteal phase, your body's potentially pregnant during that time. So you're going to be more sensitive to stressors. Exercise is a stress, remember that. And you need to do more restorative workouts, and your body becomes a little bit more insulin resistant. Because again, if you are pregnant, that's a natural process that happens. Your body becomes a little bit more insulin resistant so that sugars can be shunted to the baby when needed. And this exercise is obviously unique to the person as well. And it depends on your health status, your energy levels, your sleep quality, your adrenal function. So when I say more intense, this doesn't necessarily look the same for everyone. It could be just a brisk walk if you're someone with adrenal depletion or health issues. Or if you're feeling good, you're pretty healthy overall, it could be a really sweaty, intense 20-minute HIIT workout. And when I say restorative exercise, it could just be a gentle stretching session during the second half of your cycle if your hormones are out of whack. Or it could be a heavy lifting session if you're feeling good overall, but with lots of rest, and if your health is pretty good overall. Remember to listen to your body as well, because just because you're in a certain phase of your cycle, you don't need to be strict with that. Listen to how you're feeling. If you're exhausted, if you've had a bad sleep, if you've been traveling, if work's really stressful, you've got a lot on your plate and your to-do list, honor that and don't just push through, because exercise is a stress. It's a good stress, but yeah, it could just be another stress in the bucket, and that could cause it to overflow. And exercise is beneficial in so many ways for hormonal health. You don't need a gym pass necessarily. You could just take the stairs more often. You could park further away from the shops when you go for your groceries. You could get off the train or the bus one stop earlier and walk the rest of the way. Stand up and work at a standing desk, or just prop your laptop on some books or something whilst you work, or take a phone call outside and walk around instead of just sitting down. And if you are someone who just does a 60-minute workout in the morning, but for the rest of the day you're sat down, that's only marginally better than someone who's a couch potato, which is sad to think, but I'd rather you be someone who lives an active lifestyle. So think of all these people in Europe, not usually the UK, but places like France and Italy. A lot of them don't do like a traditional workout class. They're just like on their feet all day. They're moving around, and a lot of them are physically healthier than people who just kill it at the gym for an hour and then just sit on their bum for the rest of the day. And muscle mass, because of the workouts that you're doing, ideally like more strength training than chronic cardio, is going to help with the insulin sensitivity, the blood sugar balance, which is coming up next, mental health, circulation. It helps to get your hormones to where they need to be, and blood flow to your uterus, your ovaries, etc. And sweating helps with detoxification of some of these hormone disrupting chemicals. So that's how it's going to support your hormones. But the types of exercise is a little bit different for everyone. So you need to find what you enjoy, what you'll actually do, and what best supports your hormonal health and where you're currently at in your cycle. So last but not least is supporting that blood sugar balance. So notice I did a lot of lifestyle ones first, but diet is foundational, so this needs to be addressed. And your endocrine system, so your hormonal system, its number one job is to actually regulate your blood sugar and glucose levels. So I'm going to use those terms, blood sugar, blood glucose, interchangeably. They're basically the same thing. So that's the priority of your hormonal system, is to keep your blood sugar regulated, to fuel your brain with glucose. So if you're not even doing that well, and if it's not well balanced, your body doesn't see your periods and your skin and your fertility as a priority. So that's why blood sugar control is so important. And at a very simple level, the easiest way to start improving your blood sugar control is to have protein, healthy fats, and carbohydrates at every meal that you have. So an example of a protein, I think most people know, would be like eggs or chicken or fish. A healthy fat would be like avocados or grass-fed butter, coconut oil. And carbohydrates would be fruits or sweet potato, beets, brown rice if you're someone who does grains. And if you're very dysfunctional with your blood sugar, you might need to start off by eating every few hours, like every 2 to 3 hours for some people. So this would be 3 meals, 2 or 3 snacks throughout the day. But it's not a good sign of blood sugar control, because ideally you should be able to go much longer between meals. And I think most people eventually should be ending up on 3 square meals a day, in my opinion. And another focus should just to be avoid the crap. So inflammatory oils, sunflower oil, canola oil, safflower, soybean oil, all of those things usually found in processed and packaged foods, takeaways, all of that, refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, which mess with our insulin. So they don't necessarily affect our blood sugar, but they do affect our fat storage and our appetite. Fake meats and fake proteins, so tofurkey or Beyond Meat, whatever it's called, the burger, just not real food. So stick with as organic as possible, things fresh from the ground, things that your grandparents would recognize as food. That's going to be a really good starting point. And carb tolerance is very bio-individual to the person. So if you're someone with, let's say, PCOS, insulin resistance, you're obese and you live a sedentary lifestyle, you're going to tolerate and need a lot less carbohydrates, not zero, but a lot less than someone who is active and lean and metabolically healthy. Plus, different types of carbohydrates suit people differently as well, due to things like genetics and gut health and your microbiome. So don't just play around with like how many carbs, like the serving size. Try and focus on different carbohydrates and see how you feel with those as well. So try fruit versus grains versus starches and see when that's best, along with the timing as well. So try having the bulk of your carbs post-workout or at your evening meal, or maybe split equally throughout the 3 meals of a day. Seriously, everyone is completely different. So don't just read what someone's saying online and implement that to yourself, because it's extremely different. Listen to your body feedback and symptoms. So if you're feeling tired after meals, it could be that you're eating too much carbohydrate, maybe not enough protein. It could be that you get blood sugar crashes between meals. That tells me either you didn't eat enough food or enough of one particular macronutrient. Maybe you're getting headaches throughout the day as well. That could be signs of blood sugar, as can anxiety, mood, like irritability. These could all be signs of a blood sugar fluctuation. If you're really struggling with this and you can't really find what works for you best, it's maybe worth considering the use of a glucometer temporarily, so short term, just to see what your unique body is doing and how it's responding. Because some people, they're just so disconnected from the body, or they're just dealing with too many health issues that they can't differentiate a lack of sleep to the breakfast that they had, even though they can be sleep deprivation can cause you to be more insulin resistant and have higher blood sugar. So it is connected really, but it can be really eye-opening. But don't become reliant on this as well, because no tests, especially some of these glucometers, aren't 100% accurate. In the UK, there's one called Freestyle Libre. I think in Europe you can get that as well. And there's some other ones in the US that you can just get a couple of weeks trial. And they have been really helpful for me, just to see that my body wasn't doing well with some of the types of carbohydrates that I was eating. Whereas if I was to have something like fruit or even white rice, my blood sugar wouldn't spike as high as eating a sweet potato, even if I was eating the same amount of calories, the same grams of carbs in there. It's just really interesting to see. And blood sugar regulation isn't just about diet and carbohydrates either. It's also about your stress levels and inflammation, your thyroid function, metabolism, muscle mass. So if you do get a glucometer or start to really focus on blood sugar, don't just narrow in on the food. Because for me, when my blood sugar was, I even did an experiment on this and shared it on Instagram. I had a blood sugar monitor like implant into my arm, and my blood sugar was like off the charts crazy. But at the time I didn't know that I had mold illness. And when I was eating the carbs, it was feeding the yeast and the mold internally and messing with my blood sugar. So the carbs weren't the problem, my body was the problem. So keep that in mind. So as I said, these were very basic, simple steps. And I'm guessing with you listening to that, there's one or two areas that you're skimping on at the moment. I like doing these types of episodes because it really dials in for me, like, oh, maybe you should work a little bit more on that yourself. So it's a nice reminder. So spend the next few weeks really focusing on the areas that you may have neglected and see how it goes. I'm sure you'll be pleasantly surprised, and maybe you've just been ignoring them or forgetting about them. But don't forget, you still have options for things like functional lab testing, supplement support, and answers if needed. So if you do them, but you're still not 100% feeling 100% great, don't just struggle and live with these symptoms ongoing, whether it's acne, hair loss, fatigue, weight gain, PMS, period problems. I'm here for you. There are answers out there when the body's given the right building blocks, the right tools, the right nutrients, and the stressors, as many as possible, are removed from the body, you can function optimally. So we'll leave it there. We're back next week with another amazing guest interview. So enjoy the rest of your day, wherever you are, and I'll speak to you soon.